Although an impressive growth has been taking place in these last few years, I've always wondered why football, what they call soccer, has always struggled to take root in the United States. There are more theories about that. One of them being that Americans are not number one in the sport, and that would discourage them. Hi, Megan. How you doing? Oh, you won the World Cup. That's remarkable. I'm just saying. Well, I don't believe it. It's underestimating. It's like saying that Americans are a bunch of overgrown kids. They produce too much culture to be considered that way. I'm talking about literature, theater, cinema, television, music, computers and software, both productivity and leisure. And moreover, the United States participates in practically all the disciplines at the Olympic Games, even if they don't necessarily excel in all of them. So, this theory doesn't work. Another theory tells us that for the American public, size does matter, even a little too much, just like an obsession. And having a look at games such as basketball and American football, it really seems like that. I mean, in basketball, if you are a wing and you're 2 meters tall, you're considered a small wing. So where am I? Anywho, size being all that matters in their sports would contravene with their own culture. The American dream promises that if you work hard, have courage and determination, you can achieve everything. According to this vision, football seems to be ideal for them because it is democratically open to anyone. In which American sport could a champion like Leo Messi have dominated as he has done in football during all these years? We're talking about a guy who had to take medicines as a kid in order to grow, and who is now, 170 centimeters tall? Not really a giant or natural born athlete, if you ask me. So even this theory doesn't seem to be satisfactory. A further theory exists and presents a Marxist angle, or capitalistic if you prefer, meaning that it talks about the economic aspect, money. Football is not continuously interrupted, like baseball, American football and basketball. So it appears to be not suitable for advertisement and commercials, and big television network won't prioritize its broadcast. Well, I have to admit that this makes quite sense. But it's not enough to explain this lack of success. Also, if public demand for football was very high, they would certainly broadcast it. Maybe using, overlay advertisement or something. When there's money to make, there's always a way. Going back to the cultural issue, some people say that Americans dislike football because when a foul occurs, more than often there's an excessive faking, with players acting like they've been almost killed, speculating with the purpose of influence the referee. Well, do you want me to reveal a little secret? We hate that too! It stinks! It's really a disgraceful shame. Unfortunately, those behaviors are due to a mixture of tainted sport culture and too many pending interests. When an opponent has already taken a yellow card, simulating in an attempt to have it sent off is a very common behavior. In women's football, this happens very rarely, probably because the environmental pressures that could lead to a similar malice are far lower, or maybe because they're just better people. I don't know. Now I'm really running out of ideas. Maybe I should conduct my investigation from a different perspective, wondering what's in American sports that football doesn't have. Let's see. There's no tie. A lot of points are scored. Ooh, cheerleaders! I like those. And marching bands, they're fun. Super Bowl halftime show. That's fun too. I'm having an epiphany. I got it now. Americans watch sport to have fun, and that's why they don't seem to like football. It's the approach. We don't fill our stadiums in order to be entertained. When a new campaign is about to begin, English speakers say, "Another season of drama and despair." That's right. We watch football to suffer. It doesn't make sense to you, does it? I'll elaborate. I'm not stating that Americans don't suffer watching their sports. And also, I'm not saying that we don't have fun watching football, but instead that suffering is an important component of our fruition. Don't get me wrong, we're not some delirious, masochistic maniacs. We just offer our willingness to suffer in the hope of receiving something extremely valuable in return. And what that would be? Catharsis. For those who are not familiar with this term, in ancient Greece culture, catharsis was a purification process that took place through a purgation. This cleansing could be purely physiological or psychological, therefore of a spiritual nature. The former could involve the use of medications, as in Hippocratic medicine, or simply being natural, as the menstrual cycle. The latter can be meant as the liberation of the soul from the irrationality of passions through music, like Pythagoras said, or a cognitive process triggered by dialogue, as stated by Socrates. But the kind of catharsis we are interested in is the detachment from passions through the strong events represented by the tragedy on the scene, of which Aristotle used to talk about. In those tragedies, a plot device called Deus ex machina, literally God from the machine, was sometimes used. Somebody applied it even too often. Isn't that so, Euripides? This narrative gimmick was utilized when a story reached a dead end. At that point, a divine intervention used to suddenly come and save the day, solving all the problems and bringing a happy ending. Now, how does this apply to football? It's actually quite simple. The tragedy is the football match itself, and the Deus ex machina, it's the goal that settles it. I think a good example is needed. So, we got this guy, the center forward, our beloved striker, or so it was. At the moment, in fact, he's not very much popular, because today, in the most important game of the season, he provided his poorest performance ever. He missed any chance he had. The match is now almost over, and he knows perfectly well that if things will end his way, his head will finish on a pike. You know us football fans, with our medieval looks and ways. But our wretched hero is familiar to another fundamental aspect of the world to which he belongs, and that is that a single good deed is enough to cancel an infamous game. If he can score the goal that will decide everything, not only all the horrible things he has done so far will be forgiven and forgotten, but we, poor fools, will elect him to our idol, and we will grant him our sisters and daughters, in addition to everything he could possibly desire. So here comes the ball, probably the last one before oblivion. The dead man running controls it with a dexterity that surprises both himself and his direct opponent. The amazement he caused to the defender gives him indeed half second of advantage, which in football is equal to the duration of a geological era. In order to exploit this 5/10 of a second, he decides to kick immediately, trying a good old instep kick. But he misses it slightly, ending up kicking with the outer instep. Today must be his day. because the goalkeeper does not read the shot properly, takes a step to the right, starting already disadvantaged. He stretches. His glove gives a light tap to the ball, but not enough to significantly change the trajectory. Then the ball touches a small portion of the post and passes through the goal mouth to finally violently shake the net in the back. Now about 20 milliseconds are needed to allow a refreshing of the, for so to say, collective consciousness. And at this point, what is about to happen? When a game is decided at the last moment in American sports, the public has already celebrated several times for scored points. A lot of steam has already been blown. Here instead, an incredible amount of anger, anguish, anxiety and stress has been brought inside of each of those present in an extremely explosive mix. I tell you, the sound of a football stadium in a similar occasion is not comparable to anything else on earth. To stay in the Hellenic cultural environment, even the conversation between the gods are interrupted, allowing them to take a look and understand what happened. That is a real collective catharsis. And this is why I'm not very fond of a thing called VAR, but we talk about that in another occasion.
Viva il calcio, il gioco più bello!